an independent consultant who has spent her career in IT service management, from frontline support, desktop, problem management, project management, and also knowledge management, where she's successfully created a knowledge management strategy and implemented knowledge management processes for a large financial services company. And Claire will be sharing that story, talking about lessons learned and key takeaways. So welcome, Claire. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks very much.
That's great to have you with us.
Just jump straight in then.
Yeah, just check your slides. There we are. That's fine. So we can see everything. Yeah, that's over to you. Thank you, Claire. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, David. Yeah, so I just wanted to share my experience. It's obviously just one journey in many and you'll probably hear a lot of guest speakers today talk about different things, but I just going through mine. About me, it was my first job on an IT service desk, my first professional job, and I've kind of worked through many different service desks to begin with, and then when I got traction, progressed through the roles. I saw how each used knowledge, but and also you have a lot of different desks. You can have 20 on one desk, we can have 5 or even less. And I kind of went through that journey with all the different ones. And what were my observations in the early days was that we were searching in different areas. We were asking each other. We were looking for quick fixes to tell customers and, on the phone. And, it always involved, it was bitty, it was, separated. It wasn't in the same receptacle. So that was early days, obviously. I'm not going to give away my age, but it was early days. And I progressed to problem manager then, and I was responsible for gaining the root causes, the fixes, for significant issues and the most of the incidents that were coming out. So it was part of my role to make sure that knowledge was passed on to the service desk. So again, by that point we had a service management tool on that particular service desk that held that information, but it was purely basic. It was, it wasn't a great, it was there, it provided the teams with the information that they needed, but again, it was kind of thought of an afterthought. I then progressed through to business liaison lead and this was for Avios, the loyalty company for international airlines group. So it was British Airways, Lingus, and Iberia, and they're growing. They're always growing. So I believe it's now called IAG Loyalty now, but yes, and when we were there, we outsourced the service desk. So the business liaison lead meant that I was sitting above the outsourced product, and it happened to be an Indian service desk that supported us. So again, it was that responsibility for making sure that they had all the knowledge that they needed for the first time fixes, and we'd also had an intranet set up so the customers could look for opportunities of fixing things themselves without even having to call the service desk. And again, it's it was early days, and it was only until I got into my role, I worked for Direct Line Group, that I was employed as a knowledge manager, and I realized the difference you could make. It was the worst possible time I started my job for Direct Line. The COVID lockdown had been announced the day before. I'd never been to the office. I'd never met my colleagues. It was all really, well, as we've always said, unprecedented experience. However, they did have a portal and a chatbot available, and we just had to maximise that, because previous to that point, they'd had to get 10,000 members of staff from all different areas to be using their home equipment, or the direct lines equipment at home on their home networks. And the strategy that we had to develop, a strategy to enable us to roll out information to them at a pace where the service desks were in complete overwhelm. They couldn't cope with the amount of calls that were coming through because of the situation. People had never used their home networks. The networks had never expected the home use to be, that had used in that manner, so we were all living in a different world, and it certainly, we learned things from it. It was all about getting the information, getting the relative information, analysing the calls, seeing what people were repeatedly ringing about, and making sure that information was was out there for them. And what did we have? Well, the one thing they could do was access an intranet, a portal. They could access it on their phones, if they had difficulty with their laptops, and vice versa. So that was a really a good thing to have. And we just sent the message out. We sent these. We worked on the documents. We worked on home networking. We went on all sorts of guides, and in an effort to reduce the amount of calls into the service desk, and we got positive feedback from it. So where am I now? So that was a period of 9 months where we dealt with that, and then I moved on to service. I'm now in service desk management consultant, and the place where I work, again, we're going to be going on that journey again about knowledge management. So that was just to give you a little bit of a background about me. So I'm just going to quickly cover this, but what is knowledge management? The ITIL process aimed at gathering, analysing, storing and sharing knowledge within an organisation, and with a primary purpose to improve efficiency by reducing the need to rediscover knowledge. So it's having data at the fingertips of the people that need it the most at the right time. It was brought in, and I know formally it was brought in ITIL 3, version 3, under the service transition area. And the reason for that is because it's all about the onboarding of new products as well. So don't miss the opportunity of when you're bringing a new service or a new application or a new product. It needs to be handed over correctly to the service operations team, and a lot of this hasn't been thought about in the past. So when I was on one of my first service desks, we would get handed a piece of paper which had, oh, by the way, you're supporting this now. These are the steps to take. If it doesn't work, you just need to ring this number, and pass that call on to this third party. And that was it. And we'd find out the week before. But now, I think we need to focus on involving the service desk in the knowledge side of service transition. So it's all about asking the service desk manager or a relevant, deputy or person who's been given that task to be involved in certain project management discussions, so that they know what to deliver when the time comes to release to live, that the service desk have everything they need to support that product. Opportunities for first time fixes, typical examples of calls that are expected for that product. If it's an external product, and they've done this before, then they will already be prepared for this. They should be prepared for it. Certainly, that's the questions you need to be asking them. If it's an internal system, and they're the ones that kind of get swept under the, they're not expecting to be asked that, and it's probably the last thing they've thought of. So because the service desk is at the end point, right? So we'll look at that right at the end, but you know, it's important on the last stages of the project that you bring the service desk members into that journey, so that they understand what's going to be expected of them when it does get released to live and what could happen. Yeah, so let me just go on to the next stage. Oh, sorry, I missed that stage, but there you go. So yeah, there's my little my knowledge management, my ITIL wheel there, for, and you can see knowledge management in the service transition side. So what do we do? What do you do? Make a plan. It's always good to start with a plan. Think about your target audience. I would see probably most companies coming into this with the IT team need the information to do the job, and their customers need the information to be able to try and first-time fix. Fix in self-serve and self-fix themselves. It's a huge thing, the self-service, or rather the when they solve it themselves, it's like a 20% cost savings on resource. So it is a big thing. Yeah, so, and also, would you completely mess up the way that you display it for your staff, your IT staff? I mean, I know that they've got the language, but is it better to think about, you don't know what their experience is going in, you don't know whether people know. I know the curse of going into a new company is all of the 3-letter abbreviations. Isn't it best just to write it out full and not assume that the person knows everything, that all the terminology that you're talking about? So it's worth having those thoughts before you go into it. Certainly as a base point, why not use the same format and then see how you get on? So yeah, that's on the documentation, is thinking of the target. The budget, what's the budget? That's obviously, you know, whether or not you're doing a massive campaign launch with, you know, with a lot of tech behind it, you're able to directly put a lot of resource behind it. Your IT service management tool, you're able to get the add-on for it. So, you know, it's all fits into place, but there are things that don't. And if you don't have the budget for an IT service management tool that includes that, then, you know, there's options on the service knowledge management system tools, which just do that, the knowledge. And it's not talking about just delivering knowledge to the service desk, it's talking about delivering it to all different teams, you know, the network teams, the second line teams, you know, everyone needs the storage. So it's good that it's all in the same point. And obviously you have to think about communication as well. So I'm just gonna go to the next slide. So what do we do? What to think about the format of what you're going to display, and keep it simple. I'm going to show you an example in a minute, so I'm just going to discuss it first, but keep it simple. Color and font play a big part in it. If you're displaying it on a customer portal, you don't know the size of the screen that it's going to go to. It could be a phone screen, so I would make it as clear and as large a font as you can get away with, because people with bad eyesight, or people, it's worth thinking about these things, you know. If it's there and it looks dense black, you know, text, it's so off-putting. So make it clear, make it colourful, put pictures in it, make it attractive. I'll just show you the example I've got here, and this is a basic one that I've done quickly, but you know, it just gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. So this one is for how do I use my Wi-Fi to make phone calls on my iPhone. Easily put together, you know, it's got a picture, people know it's about an iPhone. You put as best practice, it needs to have an author and a version, just in case it's printed out and someone says, oh, is that the up-to-date version? Let's just quickly look on the portal. A date, that it was published. So, and a review date, I would say a review date set 6 to 12 months after it was first published. And as you can see, it's quite clear. This is in Century Gothic. You pick a font and stick with it. I would always pick the same font and stick with it if you could, because then they know if you are launching knowledge. If you've got a knowledge management project that you're launching, you know, then they will know that it's the new version if you've agreed on your format ahead. The color, I don't know if you can tell on this, but the color of it, it's navy font, which I think is a lot more attractive to the eye than black. A lot of diagrams will be black, so it'll contrast. Yeah, so I opted for that, and it's just thoughts really, but as you can see, it's big font, it's clear, and it has a scope. So what is this guide about? It's about, it tells you in that scope, it tells you exactly what the document is about. So you're not opening something up and scrolling down the document to see whether or not it's got the information that you need. It's all there in that scope. And also the prerequisites, what do you need to complete the process? And there is exactly what you need. And then you've just got the stages of the process there. So yeah, so that's just ideas to think about. Going back to themes, if you were minded to it, you could have themes. In one place I was at, we had, I don't even remember, those yellow dummy guides, you know, the dummy guide to this and the dummy guide to that, and it was quite an obvious yellow background with a black picture on top of it, and we started doing themes like that, and one of them was the dummies, but we didn't say dummies because it was, you know, a little bit derogatory, so we just said you know, the direct line guide to you know, home networks, working from home, you know, which would give all little, it was in a very comical font, and it was very almost set up like a magazine, but so it was easy to read, and so people knew what things could happen and how to fix it, and it was quite you know, useful. So sorry, gone ahead one there. So so how do you launch it? And again, this is what we did, a teaser campaign. Look at what's coming ahead. Keep an eye on this. This is what we're going to, this is what we're going to be doing in the future. It's best to speak to your PR team about it, communications team, you know, about how you could do this communication. So I know some companies don't like email as a communication tool, but you know, it's having those discussions, thinking about SnapCons if you could do it, your intranet, you know, I'm thinking about email and SnapCons if you didn't have an intranet that could launch it. You might want to create characters. You know, we had a chat bot, and the chat bot, you could do a little doodle on a chat bot, and you could get into sticky moments, and you could just develop a character. Should not take too long, but you know, it might warm people that weren't used to seeing things. Oh, sorry, I've gone ahead. Seeing things about that particular character. It might make them want to read it. It might, you know, you could give some valuable information in that circumstance. Keep it simple. If you put in the first things would be good. If you were going to start the knowledge management, how do I log a fault? How do I log a request for the customers? You know, and it's just thinking at the lower level and going up, and no tech language, unless you work for a tech company and they're all technicians, you know, they're all IT experts, then, you know, that's that would be a different audience. So okay, so just going to the next bit. So here's just a couple of tools that embrace knowledge management. The you know, the tools I mentioned, the service knowledge management system tools that just purely deal with knowledge if your company couldn't afford or, you know, the budget wasn't there for them to be integrated into your service management tool. And if I just go. And that is pretty much me, to be honest. Happy for any questions or anything really.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Claire. Thank you. We have got a number of questions that come through. I think Barbara has been extremely busy on questions. Thank you, Barbara.
Really?
We're gonna. So I think some of them sort of have more meaning in a wider sense, and some of them are direct, right? So I'm gonna maybe pick on a few. The one point Barbara has brought up is the sort of style, the format and guide. You know, I think it's fair to say that if you've got an experience that doesn't actually grab the person using it, then it might not be as well used, you know. So if it's a central point of stuff, if it looks great, if it's a great experience. And Barbara's asked if you have a formatting style guide with all the details that you gave there. Would you say that that's a good approach? Is it something that you used before? If that's the case, is that used across more than one area, or would you find that the styles differ depending on, you know, different areas and how they manage knowledge as well?
I think I'm very much, I don't have a guide as such. This is my experience over the my you know, sort of experience, if you like, of doing this. I think it would be a good idea to do that, you know. Sorry, just getting my cat off my yeah. So yes, I think it's a good idea to do that, to set it out. I think you just need to be consistent, and certainly to have it against, you know, just agree that as part of your format from the beginning. I'm quite happy to share that little guide I did. I'm quite happy to share that with people if you want me to. You know, so you've got that. But it's just from what I've learned, you know, over the years, really.
Yeah, that's good. I'm sure if you have the opportunity to share that with Holly, I think it's something that we can make available, you know, if we can. So that's great. There are a few more. We'll maybe try a few more. There's one in relation to sort of data or knowledge, rather, ownership. So really it's about, let me just, if I can find it. So handing over, right? So the documentation, availability through the transition period, because I think, yes, you know, that transition period is very, very important. It gives you a foundation, doesn't it, to the rest of products or services, but it's also something that is it's a daily occurrence. It's part of culture. It's a culture thing. We'll see more of that today. And Barbara asked again about understanding the need to make documentation available, the handing over, but she also queries thoughts on the service desk owning the content which they may not be the SME of. So I think that's really about ownership, right? Yeah, and sort of how in your experience, maybe we'll see some of this today, right? About looking at IT per se.
I think so. No, I think, just to say, and I probably skirted over that, I was kind of referencing service desk questions, trying to offset calls to the service desk, but definitely the teams, I would suggest a nominated knowledge manager and a deputy for when they're on leave, because, you know, these things are that important, that they have a discussion point, that they're involved in the projects, and that they have all the, you know, they would, as I mentioned, the teams have their own knowledge, but certainly that the experts, if you don't have a knowledge manager, for instance, if you haven't got someone to filter it through to make sure it looks right and everything, then that's where that guide comes in, you know, for format and how it should display to the customers, and, you know, and for the service desk as well. So, but yeah, I think you'll get a lot of information about that over today.
Yeah, I think you're right. There'll be a lot more for people to consume as we go through the day. And I think it's fair to say, actually, Claire, that the questions have gone absolutely mad. I think we've got more questions in the first, right, than I've seen for a while. So I'm going to try and pick some of these out. Apologies if I don't get to them all. There's a question here from, let's have a little look, from Michael, and he talks about advice on resourcing, knowledge creation, maintenance. Again, you know, we'll come on to this. I'm sure there'll be a lot of this. So if the desk is targeted on calls, volumes, knowledge gained on calls, how do you share your time? How do you work with, you know, and we talked about this before we started. It seems to me, and certainly in my experience in operations, it's a great thing to consider, talk about, but usually we're all too busy. So how do you fit that into an organizational, you know,
So this is
best
where your
practice.
nominated person comes in, you know, and it doesn't have to be a manager in the area. It can just be, you know, it can be in someone's objectives that they're the nominated knowledge expert for their area. And I would suggest that all the different, you know, teams, be it networks, be it, you know, EUC and the service desk all meet, you know, regularly. I won't say weekly, but regularly, you know, about it, because, you know, it is important and we need to make sure that we are sharing information, and it's quite valuable. So I think that's the way you get around, you know, using so many people being involved in it. But yeah, making sure that there's someone that does take responsibility, I think, and it might be someone wears a knowledge management hat on. It might not be their primary role, but it could be a secondary role, and it's always good to have, you know, that experience on you know, on your CV.
Yeah. We've got another one from Robert, who asks, if knowledge management is sort of in the tool already, so if you have it there incorporated in what you're doing, do you still need to add the scope and author sections? Now, I think that's a good question. I think that's a question really about the governance and about definition and about succession and all that other stuff as well. So if you, in your experience, Claire, how important is that? How important is the definition, the controlling factors around knowledge? Just because it's in a tool, just you've got some stuff in a tool, do you need the rest of it?
I think definitely you need the scope, because the person who's reading it, say you were displaying it on a customer portal, you'd need the scope, because when they're reading it on the portal, they wouldn't know whether or not that document was relevant to what they were after, you know, when you're searching for it, just because there's similar things. I mean, that one, for instance, it was iPhones. There could be one for Androids, there could be tablets, there could be all sorts. And it's just like, is this what I want? And that's for directed at the customer. So I think that scope definitely, and the prerequisites definitely. The versions, I always think, I know that we're not printing it out much nowadays, but I always thought if they print the document out, the date would be useful. You know, it's the judgment call, really. I wouldn't say definitely no or definitely yes. You know, it's just really what your company wants to decide on, and for you to agree that, you know, but yes, certainly that management of it would be picked up by the tool.
Yeah. I think we've probably got time for just one more, and I think we'll go back to one of Barbara's questions. And this is a really good question, actually, about sort of, we talked about succession briefly, didn't we, just then, and sort of having something that you can hand on to. And Barbara asked, yeah, authoring is great. When the content is reviewed, who's responsible if the original author is no longer with the organization or has moved to another position? How do you manage succession in knowledge? Because if that succession doesn't work, then pretty much surely that's got to be
it all comes down, doesn't it? Yeah. So again, it's the teams having a. This is my suggestion, and it would, you know, again, I can't say for definite, it is a judgment call, but I would say that if the teams have responsibility for the knowledge from their team, say for example the end user computing team, and they have all that knowledge available, then they need to make sure that the person who, you know, takes over from that role needs to, you know, take over, needs to be given that job. So it's part of the whole company, you know, it's part of the whole IT department embracing the knowledge, you know, and it has to be bought into, because like you say, it would just be going out of date. It has to be reviewed. It has to be stayed on top of, because otherwise you've been on this great launch of knowledge, and then it's 6 months old, and it slowly becomes irrelevant over the time period. So you really do need, and it needs to be driven from above as well, that they need to embrace, because otherwise you spent the money on it and not, you know, you spent the money on whatever money the budget was, the resource that's gone into it, it would be a waste of time. So yes, you still need your knowledge, what do you call them, you know, people in the teams, and like I say, a deputy just to make a call if they're not around, you know, just so something can go out, and then, you know, from there, and it needs that job needs to be handed over when people leave.
Good. Okay. So that pretty much, I think, wraps it up, Claire. Thank you very much indeed for that. We've still got a load of questions, and Holly, if you've got the opportunity in the background, Holly's working in the background feverishly. If you can sort of copy and paste those questions, it'd be great to capture those, I think. And if we have the opportunity to answer them in slower time, that would be great. So if you could do that, that's fantastic. All great points, and what you've said already in some of the posing questions. I mean, we're going to see an awful lot of that today. So there's an awful lot more to understand and listen to, so you can contextualize and whatever that means to your organization. So yeah, thank you very much indeed, Claire. Some brilliant story there. Really, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we get a chance to do this again sometime. So thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot. Enjoy your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Okay, now just before we move on to our next guest, we have got a number of listeners' polls today. So we're going to launch our first one now. And a lot of what has already been said is sort of in here as questions. So if we can launch that, please, Holly. And you'll see